All right, so we just had our emergency dev stream, the campfire chat. So this one was kind of brought on a lot by the reaction to 1.1 and how people feel about the patch. And so this was kind of like their emergency apology, put out the fires kind of situation. So before I'm going to go through everything that was said on the stream, give my perspective not only as a Diablo 4 player, but also as someone who has been in the chair they're sitting in many, many times over many years. I know exactly what it's like to sit in that hot seat. And so we'll give that kind of perspective as we go along. As far as I can tell on this, it does seem like there's a mixture of a lot of things going on as to what led up to season or patch 1.1.0 being received the way that it was. And we can dive into that too. But I know you're here for the summary, so let's just go through that. So the full summary of that is, I'm just going to go through like all the things they said and what can be learned. The first thing that Joe Pipiora, the AGD, the Associate Game Director, mentioned at the beginning, which was probably the only concerning thing that I saw in the whole thing, was that they actually want Nightmare 100 to feel the same as Nightmare 70 does now. Like they actually want most people to be able to clear Nightmare 100. I personally have an issue with this. I don't think this is the right strategy. I think this is fine if they want to add like Nightmare 150 or something, but I definitely do not want them to make all of the Nightmare dungeons significantly easier so that clearing 100 is less of an accomplishment. I'd rather them just kind of balance around that. But there's other changes coming, so take that for what that is. Here is a summary of what they said about this. Was kind of like Joe going over the changes that they made for 1.1.0, how they felt about it, and their thinking. Now, keep in mind that I'm just kind of I'm inferring from the way they speak and from the way they're talking how exactly they're going into this. So the way it was described is that they nerfed CDR because it was due to a lack of diversity in high difficulty build choices, that you were able to get instant resets on abilities that they recognize feels fun, but they don't think that it should be a required statistic. And that's why they nerfed CDR. So just like it was in the patch notes, it seems like that is one-to-one what their thinking is. I don't necessarily agree with that direction, but it does seem like that is not like a misunderstanding or miscommunication. They do want CDR to be less required as an option. Same thing goes for vulnerability. They don't want it to be a high viability option. They do want vulnerable to be less potent. Now, they mentioned something that the reason they nerf vulnerable is because they want to remove the reliance on dealing damage with vulnerable, that they don't want people to feel like that a target needs to have vulnerable on it in order for them to deal damage on it. And this is why they nerfed vulnerable. And I feel like this could be a whole other video and separately on what that is. But they did, thankfully, right after these two statements, they did acknowledge that they understand what the problem is with vulnerable, that it's not that vulnerable is too strong or that there's too much vulnerable in the game. The problem is with the equation on how vulnerable is calculated. So they understand that at the very least. So at least, kind of we know that going forward. So at least from their perspective, how they described it, they said that they can't move vulnerable into the additive bucket without nerfing other stuff first. So they want to nerf vulnerable and nerf crit damage and nerf CDR and bring everything down, and then add aspects, and then they want to move vulnerable over into the additive bucket or change how the calculation is made. That is just kind of where they're at. My biggest gripe, and I think their biggest failing in patch 1.1.0, is what is called change management. They didn't mention it in the patch. They didn't mention it specifically in the review show, but this is exactly the problem they're facing right now, which is there was little to no change management with the patch itself, in that they didn't provide alternatives to the things they were taking away. They didn't prepare the player base properly for what was coming. They didn't do the changes that they wanted to do down the road at the same time that they were fixing things, right? So like if the goal is to lower all of the XP for everything in the game in anticipation of the density going up, then you can't lower all the XP and then a month later raise all the density with that separation of time and expect anyone to be happy about that, right? Like if you separate those things, like they need to happen at the same time, or do the good thing first and then the bad thing after, or like try to line those up with better expectation management and change management rather than just hey, we're going to piecemeal these things out. We're going to nerf a bunch of stuff, and then later down the line, we probably will fix it. We promise we'll fix it. It'll get better. We don't know. I think they acknowledge that that is one of their problems as a development team, as a production team, and as communication. So I think this idea here, there's definitely a lot of acknowledgement that is in the right position and the right state for them as developers in general. So I'm happy about that, right? They recognize that the core problem with Vulnerable is the way it's calculated. They recognize that they want more build diversity. Whether or not they accomplish that is a separate discussion, but they do want that, and that's what they're going for. And they do recognize that their biggest problem right now is change management. And so if they can get better at that as a live service game, I think it'll go a long way with the player base. They brought up mission statement. This is a very Corpa thing to do. Everyone does this. This is their pillars for their game. They want a wide variety of builds and build diversity. Of course they do. They want new items and build variety with new seasons. Of course they do. They want continuing to evolve endgame content. Of course they do. And they want fun in the game and want players to find fun. Of course they do. Take that for what it will. It's their pillars, you know, for the game. They also mentioned this like in the stream too, which was good. Another good acknowledgement of the game itself. They don't like permanent CC, where you just get CC'd over and over and over, and they don't like getting one shot, which is a big criticism for the game right now. Corpse bows from off screen, boar charges from off screen, getting frozen until you die, getting stunned and then dying to a one shot afterwards, like revenants hitting, the tree ants hitting in one shot, all these kinds of things, bombs, explosions, lunatics. They said that they don't long term want perma CC or one shots, and they talk about how they're going to fix this later, and we'll get into that in just a minute, but they did acknowledge that that is a problem. So this was, I think, so far a good stream. They also acknowledge their words: when making changes, we first provide alternatives. This is like these are the commitments that they're making, right? All the way down to I think all of these actually, all of these are commitments that they're making to the community, saying, hey, we want to be better about this stuff. We acknowledge that we failed. So here's what we're looking for. So they're saying that we want to make changes, and when we make changes, we will provide alternatives at the same time. So as a community, we'll have to hold them to that, and you'll have to see if that, you know, ends up coming to fruition. But I think that's very, very good. That is very accurate and apropos. They also want, as far as like a high level philosophy, they want to have predictable changes in meta. And what this means is that they want everyone to expect that at the start of a season, everything's going to be, you know, thrown up into the air, that everything's going to change, the meta is going to change, people are going to be shifted all around and thrown around and nerfed and buffed and all that stuff. But they do like the fact that at the start of season one, big changes happened, and they do want people to get into the mindset of expecting that at the start of every season going forward. They do, however, say that they reserve the right to quickly react to bugs or things that are unintended. So like Gore's exploding wrists, the bleed rip doing trillions of damage, you know, things that like might be like aspect of control that might be too much. So they do reserve the right to swoop in at any moment and nick that out of the game if they feel like it shouldn't be there. So take that for what you will. I think this is good for most bugs, but you know, they do also, in general, I heard Joe Shelley, the game director, he said this himself, that breaking the game is the goal. And that is true for all PvE games, especially ARPGs. You do want the player to be like, oh, if I put this with that, and I max this stat, and I equip this thing, and I cast this spell before that spell, I want the server to shut down because I'm so strong, right? That is the goal of ARPGs, and they at least acknowledge that. Whether or not they achieve that is kind of up for what you guys think, but they do at least acknowledge it. So far, again, they have a good understanding. They also will aim to make changes at the same time instead of piecemeal, which is kind of what I talked about up here around change management and swapping things in and out, like doing things at the wrong time. And they also said they're committed to giving us patch notes sooner rather than the day of the patch going live. And so there's that. Then they mentioned that next week, Friday, July 28th, there will be a patch note stream for patch 1.1.1, which is the first kind of update after patch 1.0. So this will be coming. They'll do a dev stream next Friday afternoon. So you'll be able to kind of pick up on that, which is pretty cool. And these are the changes that they're looking to do. And some of these, based on the way they worded it, I'll tell you are not coming in the very near term, but this is kind of what they're looking for. They did mention that they are looking at Barb and Sorcerer aspects specifically. So they do, like, one of their main goals for 1.1.1, which is coming in the next few weeks, is they want to buff up all of the bottom Barbarian and Sorcerer aspects specifically. They said they're still looking at other classes, but that is one of their main goals. The patch is expected in the next couple weeks. We'll have the dev stream coming next Friday, and then hopefully the following week, or at the latest the week after, we'll see 1.1.1 go out. And later today, there's going to be a hotfix that supposedly nerfs Nightmare Dungeons. I sincerely hope this is not the patch that makes Nightmare 100 equal to the difficulty of Nightmare 70, because that is a feels bad. I do not like that at all. But we'll see. We'll see what the hotfix notes are. They don't have notes for us yet, so we'll go with that from there. They also, for 1.1.1, which is coming in the next few weeks, they do want to increase density substantially in Helltide and Nightmare Dungeons. They're going to make all Nightmare Dungeons more substantially dense, and they want to make Helltide more dense in the areas where it's not dense. That's not going to be applied equally to all areas of Helltide, but the areas where it's feeling like it's not, an invasion, they want it to feel like an invasion, which I think is really good. And they did kind of hint to the fact that the reason they made the XP changes is because they wanted this to come, and they recognized that nerfing the XP before this change and then spreading those changes out may have not been the best idea. They also are continuing to work on performance stalls FPS. They want to make that better. They did confirm that the gems going to your materials tab is coming in Season 2. They also confirmed that you're getting one more stash tab in 1.1.1. I know some people feel like this is definitely not enough, but it's better than nothing. So at least you get that, it's an extra stash tab. So instead of having 5, you'll have 6 total, and that will probably just be for a gold price. You'll unlock it, and you'll at least get a little bit more there. They also said in 1.1, they're going to be reducing the respec costs down about 40%. So if we do some quick math, I've respec'd a million, billion times. It's about 25 million to respec fully at level 100. So that will come down to about 15 million if they're changing both Paragon and respecing for all that. So that's going to be a lot better of a respec. Still not there. There's also another one that really shocked me based on the wording there, but they said they realized that the nerf to XP based on levels slowed the game down, as in like realized after the fact. I think what they wanted, their intention for the changes is they didn't like that people were not pushing higher difficulty above 3. They didn't like that the most optimal leveling was for +3 levels above you and no more. And so they graduated that scale further out so that it encouraged people to do higher levels. And then they realized after the fact that that may have slowed the game down in leveling. But specifically, they said they don't like group reset meta. And I think this is, there's truth to this for sure. I think there's a lot of people that only play RPGs when they can get boosted. And I feel like you miss out on a player base, like a subset of the player base, if you can't boost people that don't have the time to level. Like they want to be able to, like, hey, my friend's been playing this season for a month. I want to play with them, but I don't have 40 hours to get caught up to where they are. Allow them to boost me. So they said they, in general, do not like the fact that someone is sitting at the entrance of a dungeon while someone else is clearing it, and then they reset, and then that resets. They don't like that aspect, so maybe expect more changes along that lines later on. Next is Q&A. I'll summarize everything they said in the Q&A section so that you are aware of what's going on. They said that leaderboards are still Season 3. They want leaderboards to be like almost like its own self-contained thing based on what they were describing. They want it to be like there's like a circuit kind of content that you do. Like you do a leaderboard thing. Like maybe it's like the new racer dungeons and only those are timed in leaderboard, and you do those specifically and that has its own leaderboard. It sounds like they don't want like a true leaderboard of like Nightmare Dungeons or Uber Lilith or whatever. They want it to be kind of its own self-contained thing. They're talking about what that is. They're working on it, and it's still currently planned for Season 3. A question was asked around Uber Uniques, and they specifically said that they don't want Uber Uniques to be part of any build theory crafting or any builds in general. They want it to be like a rare thing that happens that's super strong and fits in every build, but they don't want them to be part of builds, and that's why they're so rare. They also said specifically, word for word, that players should not expect to find these in general, so they're kind of happy where that is. But they did say that they want them to be a little more common in the future, and I added a little smiley face because, that could mean a lot of things, but it sounds like they do want to raise it up a little bit, but they actually generally like where Uber uniques are so that they can, it's a random boost of power that you shouldn't expect to find, but when you do, it's pretty cool. Crowd control was finally brought up after many dev streams. Very happy about this. And Joe Shelley mentioned that they are adjusting unfair things. So like getting perma CC'd, they're going to be adjusting that in future patches. And they also want to simultaneously adjust the player tools that are available, unstoppable, CC cleansing, avoidance for those kind of things. They want to add more on both sides. They want to nerf the things that are too CC heavy, and they also want to add more tools for players, but they ended this conversation with, yes, it is a problem. We get it. We recognize it. They mentioned loadouts, and based on, I'm going to give you the true summary, which is it's not on the schedule. They talked about how the UI team is excited about it, or that it would be a cool feature, and they know it's really cool, which it amounts to it's not on any production schedule. No one has actually talked about it. It may not have even gone through UX or UI design yet, so don't have any expectations around loadouts in the future based on what I heard, but take that for what it is. Content-wise, they want more World Tier 4 content in Season 2 and beyond, so like more things to do, like another activity that's not Helltide, Nightmare, Uber Lilith. They want another activity that will be coming along. They also mentioned that they are in discussion with loot filters, but again, the way they described it tells me it's not on the schedule, it's not official, no one's put it on any pipeline or anything. So loot filter-wise and loadout-wise, don't expect that anytime soon. It may even be like S3, S4, if it ever comes in that business. It did confirm that there will be mid-season updates, like 1.1.1, 1.1.2. So they want to do that during the season. We're not kind of left with what's going on now. They said that survivability is a big topic for the next patch, 1.1.1. They do want to make this better, specifically for Sorc. They singled them out for that. And they also mentioned that there's a lot of bugs right now with one-shots, which is true. There's plenty of issues like with a board charge, where if you CC the board charge when he starts the charge, you'll still get damaged by the charge, even though the board doesn't move. So there's issues that they want to fix around that. And it sounds like that they're going to address, hopefully, all the gripes that I have with those, like corpse bows not having their stand-up animation, or they're supposed to fire their first shot and miss. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they preload in the next room and then they fire their first shot and hit. So there's definitely some bugs and things that go along with that. They also are discussing stash fixes for aspects. Someone in chat brought up the idea I had around putting aspects in the codex in some way so that you don't have to use inventory space. It sounds like that's the first they've heard of it, so they might be going a different direction on that solution, but they are discussing ways to fix too many aspects being in your stash, and they hope that the extra stash tab that we're getting in a couple weeks will help alleviate that. I also heard someone asked about the leave dungeon thing going from 3 seconds to 5 seconds, which I gave them complete benefit of the doubt for, because usually for these sorts of things, if they don't make sense to the player, it's very possible that it's a platform back-end kind of thing. Like there's some technical reason why it had to be increased. It doesn't make sense. It's not as fun, but there's like some reason, like, loading screens or the way things are dynamically loaded, or going in and out of dungeons, or, maybe there was a console reason why it needed to be longer. Those are usually not very sexy, and you don't explain them to the player very often because they're not going to get it, but usually that is. But when asked directly, it didn't sound like either of the Joes knew why that change went in, and they said they'll evaluate to see if it still needs to be in there, which means that either these are not the right guys to ask, like they weren't aware of why that change was there, or it was just done for no reason. So, I don't know. A couple new legendaries and uniques each season is the goal. They do want to have a couple new. So I guess the amount of legendaries and uniques that we got for season 1 is what they want going forward. They also do want to bring up the bad ones pretty often, like buffing the lower ones, but it seems like that the amount that we got is what they expect. It feels like it's a little light, but it's, like one legendary each, and then like one unique each, and then a general. I feel like that's probably best for power creep, but it could definitely be more. They said that resistances needs a systemic change, which is true. And they said that they want to do it right, which is the correct way to do it. They shouldn't, rush that one and screw it up. And they said that resistance changes is still targeted for season 2. It was brought up that campaign bosses you see once and never again. And the response was, yeah, that's a good point. Sounds good. Nothing concrete there. They said that they would love to have more ways to modify gear. And they said, yeah, oh, actually, that's sounds good. Nothing concrete there. And they also said, hey, minions are still not what they could be, what they should be, druids and necromancers both. And they said, oh, yeah, that sounds good. So that is the summary of the patch notes in general. Again, I want to remind you guys that these are people. I've sat where they're sitting right now. Based on what I can tell, it seems like Joe Shelley has not slept enough in the last 2 weeks, and he definitely needs a nap. And it does seem like Adam was very, very much nervous and concerned for this stream and wanted it to go well. And it does seem like they are acknowledging and committing to the failings that they had with this patch and going forward. And it's very possible, too, that, you know, with a lot of the staffing changes that Blizzard had this year and last year, that there are people stepping into roles that they are still experiencing and learning the ins and outs of. So I think that it goes a long way that they were able to acknowledge all the right things with this. Obviously, words are one thing, actions are another, but kind of give them a break and kind of, you know, if you're someone who's on the fence, if you're someone who's very in opposition of this, you know, wait and see what happens and see if they can make good on their promises. Because I think that so far it's good stuff. I think there definitely is good stuff in general. So that's the summary. There you go. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.